Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Hashim Forrester. Hashim is the SVP of Remote Service Delivery at Wescom Credit Union, one of the largest credit unions in Southern California. He spent about 30 years in operations and service delivery, and at Wescom, his team has become the trailblazers for the organization's AI adoption. They're the ones running Copilot in production, deploying intelligent virtual assistants on the phone system, and building out AI-driven quality assurance. What makes Hashim the right voice for this conversation is that he's just not piloting tools. He's got measurable results, strong opinions on where agentic AI is headed, and a clear-eyed view of why financial services can't afford to be 80% correct. Hashim, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you for having me, Ankur.
Well, I'd love to dig in a bit more regarding your role at Wescom. Could you just give us a better sense of what remote service delivery does and how it fits into what Wescom does?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me. Glad to be here, and thank you for the great intro. Very, very kind of you. So in my role as Senior Vice President of Remote Service Delivery here at Wescom Financial, I'm responsible for the remote servicing strategy and the delivery across multiple channels. So that includes our voice, text, chat, and video banking. That primarily consists of our member contact center and our virtual branch, which we call our Anywhere branch.
Now, I think when we look at old school delivery, there were a lot of physical branches. If you have ever had an issue, you would go down to the branch, talk to a real person there in the flesh. What does it look like in terms of Wescom's strategy? How does a physical operation coincide with the remote operation, and how has that changed perhaps in the last 5 years or so?
I've been in this field, as you mentioned, for 3 decades now, and I've seen the evolution of banking and financial institutions, and it's completely different, by the way, especially over the last 5 to 10 years with AI leaps and bounds and how it's driving a lot of efficiencies in organizations. In the beginning, I would say that the banking or financial industry evolved from an only channel to an omni-channel, right? All we had were phones. We pick up the phone and we would service our customer, our member in this case. And now our members have various channels to reach out to their financial institution any time of the day, right, or night. I would say that our digital services technology is leaps and bounds from where it was before. I mean, you can literally bank on your phone, which is why we have our virtual branch name called the Anywhere branch, because you can bank anywhere you are in the world with your phone. And where Wescom strikes this balance is that we have over 30 branches across Southern and Central California. And we also have this Anywhere branch concept where this team is able to service our members who are outside of our footprint or within our footprint. So we have a combination of meeting our members where they are, whether that's by phone, whether that's walking into a branch, whether that's by a video banking. Again, we want to meet our members where they are, and we have evolved as the industry has evolved and staying ahead with technology.
Could you explain a little bit about how much interaction or volume there is across the different channels? Because it's a little bit hard to comprehend how the trends have shifted over the years. But today, how much volume do you have across the various channels?
Yeah, we take over 1 million inbound phone volume into our organization. And of that, about 60% of it goes into the contact center annually. And for our virtual branches, it's a little bit of I would say it's a newer organization that we've sort of built out from our contact center. So we service members who join us online who are more than 25 miles from a branch, right? So they don't have the luxury of walking into a branch. So that volume is slowly but surely, I would say we start off at about 30,000 members in that cohort, and we have plans to expand that another 30,000 for members who join us online that are within our branch footprint, for those who choose not to walk into a branch, but they do have one that's nearby.
And how does that work? So let's just say they're more than 25 miles away. What sort of experiences have you designed? Because I think people are familiar with walking into a branch, using an ATM, calling in when they have an issue through a phone call. But what does that Anywhere branch concept look like? What sort of experience do members experience and get?
It's primarily over the phone, and if there's an interaction or a request that a member needs, and they just want to talk to someone or see someone, we have video banking capabilities. So we're able to hop on like a video call, like we are today, and service our members. So that's the secondary metric there. And then we also have text capabilities. We're able to text back and forth and communicate with our members, as well as email and chat.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you have all of those channels, right? It's like a very modern fintech or software business, and I think the teledoc concept around people having during COVID, especially people not being able to go in person to see their doctors and such, and having to call in and getting a video face chat. I think that's becoming more normalized and more mainstream across multiple channels. So it's no surprise that banking has this. I'm not sure if the major banks have this. For example, we do some of our banking with Chase, and I haven't seen that concept quite there yet, but I have seen this across other institutions. So it does seem like you're trailblazing the variety of different options and making sure you can meet members where they are, whether it's chat, voice, these virtual calls that could happen, which allows them to experience people at least through like a Zoom like interface, and then physical branches as well.
Yeah, and really, Wescom is dedicated to being a full service financial partner, right? To help Californians build better lives, and really build better, healthy financial futures, right? So we build the technology to align with our members' needs and our mission. And our mission is to help build better lives for Californians, right? So we do that through whether it's financial education, through these superior banking tools, as well as, low rates and fees for our members.
I'd love to maybe just dig into one area, which is, and I think in order to deliver a really great omni-channel experience, what I've seen is that you really do need to make sure the experience doesn't feel fragmented, right? So like going into the branch is a different sort of experience than calling in, and the data doesn't synchronize, and they don't really know who you are when you call in versus if you go in, maybe you get a different sort of experience. And I think it comes down to like having really good centralized knowledge that makes it feel like a cohesive experience, regardless of which channel you drop in on, especially if you drop in on one channel and then segue into another channel. So how have you thought about and have solved for at least some of that problem that typically occurs when you have an omni-channel approach?
Yeah, technology is the fuel for our strategy. We can have all the data to know who you are and why you're calling, but if we don't give you accurate answers to your requests or to your questions, then we failed, right? So we spent a lot of time focused in on our procedures and our processes, and how do we make it easy for our frontline representatives to find the answer quickly while a member's on the phone, waiting for that answer. And as you know, I don't know if worked in a contact center, but in a contact center, you just don't know what you're going to get on any call, right? It's like, remind me of that movie Forrest Gump, where he says it's like life is like a box of chocolate, right? You just never know what you're going to get. So our team members, when they're on the phone, they don't know what type of call they're going to get or what type of question. So what we've done is we've spent a lot of time focused on our knowledge-based system. And in my experience in this industry, knowledge-based issues have always, been a topic. And I've never been in a place where we were able to sort of solve that puzzle, right? Of having, accurate, well-written procedures for team members to follow, and find it fast, right? But I would say that with the leaps and bounds in technology and AI, we were able to get our tools, which is our processes and procedures, get them updated, written properly in a standard format, and load it up into our technology using AI, to where now our team members, when a member calls, they can type it. It's an assistant. It's a knowledge assistant. You can type in the question and you get the answer step by step. And we've seen some really great results from that. So we're not talking conceptually here. We've seen some lower turnover for our new hires. We have the lowest turnovers we've had in the last 4 years. Our first contact resolution is better by 34% with the reduction in call transfers. And we're also seeing faster speed to answer, what we call lower member wait time. So our members are waiting at a slow, shorter pace. We're answering calls faster because we're finding answers and are able to solve member questions and issues at a much faster rate than we ever have before.
That's incredible, because that is the North Star that I think AI practitioners have been positioning for, which is, can we standardize the data that make that accessible to frontline employees to be able to then leverage to deliver better member outcomes. So could you maybe just help break that down for us? Like, it seems like today when members call in, they still have that human to human interaction with an employee at Wescom, but the employee at Wescom now have better means to serve the member, right? Because they're able to access information more quickly, perhaps. And so the resolution quality is better, resolution times are shorter. Is that correct, Hashim? And then so I suppose, like, going a layer deeper is maybe technically or process wise, what software did you use? What steps did you take to enable that outcome?
From a tactical perspective, the first thing we did was we reviewed all of our policies and procedures to ensure that they were up to date, accurate, and that's where we uncovered opportunities. Right, just the way it was written. It's written, probably from someone who knows the job. So we had to look at our procedures in a different lens, right? And the lens that we looked at it was saying, hey, from a 7th grade language, if you wrote it in 7th grade language, made it easy to find within 10 seconds, how could we rewrite our procedures? So, we specifically use Dynamics and Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, as our tools to leverage, so that we could input our updated, better written, procedures into our large language model, which is Dynamics. And then when we put them in there, we were able to now use our template, right? So we created a template, like we call a quick reference guide. We just made it easier, right, for our reps, so that they can look at a procedure, they can see what they need to know, ask what they need to ask, and then they can go down. It's like a TLDR, right? You get the first paragraph, you know what you need to do, and then you can go down to the details if you need to know more. And then the power of Copilot to list it in steps, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, just made it so much easier for our representatives. So again, it started with the detailed review of procedures, identify those gaps, created that standardized template with the quick reference guide, and then validating it with our subject matter experts that what we were going to upload into Dynamics was accurate, right? Because the thing about data is, if the data is not right, then your strategy is going to fail, because Copilot AI is going to pull from your data source. So your data source has to be what I call clean, right? So if you have clean data, you get clean and accurate results. If you don't, with like the phrase, bad data in, bad data out, right? So after we validated it, got it into Dynamics, you put it into Copilot, and that's where the fun begins, because now you need to train Copilot, right? Because the Copilot can give you the answer in the frame of a member, and you may want it as a team member, right? So, and then there's the reporting aspect of it, because you can have these cool tools, but if your team doesn't believe in the tools, or they don't see the value of the tools, and that's going to impact the adoption, right? And it's no use in having a nice, pretty, Ferrari in the garage and no one's driving it, right? So, so having the reporting, once you get it into Copilot, to ensure that you've got adoption and coaching and feedback and learning, we were able to put that all together to where now it's really making the frontline job way easier to service our members.
Yeah, I think this is a critical approach that I think is the right one, which is getting the data house in order. So if you don't have good, clean policies, then you're going to get pretty garbage responses, and that's going to make things worse even than better. So it makes sense that you started there. But I do want to hone in on that second phase, which once you got Copilot running, and it seemed like maybe there was a little bit of time before users truly started using it. And like, one of the things that we hear quite a bit and we see firsthand is the number one thing for getting ROI is just getting proper user adoption, right? I think the Ferrari example is a great one. It doesn't matter how great your Ferrari is if no one's driving it, if no one's getting value from it, it's just sitting in the garage. And so, how did you work through that problem? What issues did you encounter? How did you overcome that hurdle of getting your employees to truly use Copilot once the good data was in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in full transparency, we failed, right? The first time we didn't do it right. And, we rolled it out just thinking that everyone was going to use it and they understood AI and we're going to be, kumbaya. It didn't work that way. So we actually didn't do it the first time. But the value of not doing it right was what we learned. And what we learned was that our data that we put into Copilot the first time, it was correct, but it wasn't in a format that would be easily digested by the system and then articulated back to the representative in a way that was easy for them to understand, right? So that's where we got into that. We did the process of rewriting our procedures in that seventh grade language, right, to sort of make it simpler, right? And that was a game changer. That was one of the game changers. So we launched our Copilot feature mid 2025, and it, again, as I mentioned, it didn't pick up traction with our frontline. We couldn't get the adoption we needed. The procedures were accurate, but they just were written in a way where Copilot just really couldn't give it to the team member in a way that was clear and precise. So we took that back to the drawing board, and as I mentioned earlier, we did all those things, and then we were able to now have our breakout year this year with this feature, and that the Dynamics tool is now enabled for us to customize the formatting, because one of the things we realized was that the formatting, it just wasn't user friendly. And that's important in a contact center because you're moving from screen to screen. You're fast paced, and in my experience, if you make the format friendly for the user to see on the eyes, it just keeps them there. It just attracts their attention, right? So we did some formatting changes, and that was really critical for a successful rollout and adoption of the tool.
On the those employees that are querying against the policies and procedures, do those same employees have the ability to query against member data, so transactions, account information, etc., when those questions come up, or are they using their conventional software to do those lookups and queries and such?
Yeah, so we have a what we call MRM, which is our host system, and that's where all of the member data is, right? The Copilot feature is an assistant to more of the procedures on the how to. So they're not integrated to where we're not sharing anything with Microsoft with member data at all. So the Copilot tool doesn't give you specific member data or requests. It just gives you the how do you do the process that you're asking for.
Do you have goals to potentially expand that data aperture to include more of that data? This is maybe me just speculating on perhaps what a future state could look like, because now, I think maybe through some trial and error, as you mentioned, Copilot's working well once you got the user experience right and had the data in a format that was more user friendly. But where does the future of this go? Are you able to kind of expand how much data is retrievable, queryable, to make maybe more queries faster than they were before?
Yeah, I think that is a logical path at some point. I would say when I think about AI, a lot of people have a lot of opinions on AI. And I think the beauty of having someone who's been in the industry pre-AI and pre some other things, so I won't date my age, you sort of see the evolution of how things go, right? I think if we start mixing member data with technology, and it gets a little fuzzy there if you don't have the right risk controls, right? And it is my number one responsibility to protect our member data, right? So what I would say from a practicality standpoint, where we are is where we are, right? And that is a AI powered knowledge assistant where the human is in control and the human is using AI as a tool to assist them so that they can assist the member accurately. So a lot of times, vendors will try to sell you, you could have an AI as your contact center and it can talk to the member for you and you don't need a person. I don't see that just yet. I see it where the human is the pilot of the plane, and that co-pilot is assisting and taking orders and following, but it's not flying the plane yet. So I don't see the path to where the AI is flying the plane just yet here, at least here at Wescom for us.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and I think credit unions really pride themselves on member experience, and I think part of that is that human to human interaction, right? It's a huge differentiating factor. Now the question is, can you make the experiences even better? And one way to do it is to kind of have the AI be the assistant, right, to the human employee, and I think that's a really great first phase. But I do know that you are running an intelligent virtual assistant on your phone system. Perhaps you have been for a number of years. How does that work from a member's perspective? Because in some ways it feels different than the experience you just described here.
And it is. So we implemented an intelligent virtual assistant in our phone system about 3 years ago, right? So this was probably around the time when AI was starting to kick off, but IVAs have been around for before AI, but it's a form of AI, right? It's still pulling from some model, right? I think the biggest difference is that the IVA, sits on top of our data source, right? So it's not I wouldn't say it's a large, it has large language model characteristics, but it's not your typical large language model that we think about today with AI. So the data is much more secure. It's integrated into our systems, and there's a lot of security that we have relative to the data and our IVA. So the IVA that we've had for the past 3 years, it's a natural language understanding bot. And when you call into Wescom Financial's phone system, you're talking to the IVA. And what the IVA does is it's like an IVR. That's another evolution, right? Where you call in and you hit the number to get to this area. You can still use it. It's called DTMF. You can still, punch a number in if you need to get to an extension or another area in the credit union. But this IVA, it speaks and it lists and it can understand you. So this IVA is where, we can, route you to the right area. And it can also handle some of the basic functions, such as a member's balance. So a member can ask, what's my balance? What's my transaction history? I'd like to pay my credit card. Or they can transfer funds between accounts. And that, again, is part of our secure network and less of sort of our LLM that we use with Copilot.
So today, if someone calls in through phone, do they hit the IVA first and then they may get routed to a human operator? Is that the right experience?
Yeah, if they want, right? If a member wants to call in and get their balance, or a member wants to go through their transaction history and they don't want to wait, or they want to self-serve, they could also do it on their digital app, right, with their phone. But if they do call in, to your point, they can talk to the IVA. It will properly authenticate them, right, based on our authentication procedures. And then we can do those sort of simple functions, 1 through 5. There's 5 functions. And if the member at any point in time would like to speak to a team member, they can ask for a representative, and the bot will get them in the queue to speak with someone in about 60 seconds.
Yeah, and I think the routing, the initial routing is great. Right? First, it maybe is able to resolve some of the easier inquiries that come in, and then if they do need human assistance, it can get routed to the right division, and I think that makes a huge difference. Is the chatbot experience, like the text-based experience that you have either on mobile or web app, is that a similar one where the bot is the first order of operation and then a human operator comes in if necessary?
That's a great question. So right now, I know our technology teams are working on a bot using the concept that I just shared with you about clean data, putting it in, and then you type in the question, it gives you the answer. We are looking at developing that. It should be out later this year on our webpage, where you can, for example, get like auto loan rates, branch hours, nothing that's proprietary, right, or confidential. Just general information that's on our website. So that's coming soon.
And I believe you're also developing a quality assurance bot that reads call transcripts. And I'm curious sort of how QA works maybe today, but in a pre, let's say, bot, and how that changes once this bot comes online.
Yeah, well, first off, I got to give, mad kudos to our technology teams here at
Hmm.
Wescom Financial. I mean, they are state of the art. And that I think is a game changer and a differentiator in and of itself, right? Because there's a technology rollout that occurs in organizations, and then there's sort of the business rollout and adoption. I'm going to bring the technology, I mean the Ferrari example back, but our technology team they build the best and fastest and most beautiful Ferraris ever, right? And that's great for leaders like me because then I get to drive them and put them into production and race them and feel the speed, right? So first off, I would say our technology teams, they came up with a bot that can really listen and score quality calls, 100% of calls. So today we do a random selection. It's a manual, and we have a quality team, very small, because we do use technology where every call is recorded and there's transcripts. So our quality team necessarily doesn't have to listen to find calls. They can use the transcripts to identify calls so that they can score, which results in coaching and feedback and whatnot and catching issues early. But the opportunity there is that we don't get to score every call. And the reason why every call is important is because every member interaction matters, not just the randomized ones, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to move from a random sampling to a near total coverage of calls that we're able to score. So right now we are calibrating with the quality assurance bot where just as the human did, it's going to read the transcripts for the calls and it's going to match it against our internal scorecard of what our expectation is of delivering exceptional member service, and then present a score. And then our supervisors would provide the feedback and whatnot. So I'm super excited about this technology where, like I said, we're piloting it, we're making the fine tuning part of it, but it's only going to make our member experience better, right? Because we're going to go from a random sampling of calls to 100% of our calls are going to be scored because they're already recorded and transcribed. But the manpower to listen and score and provide feedback will be exponentially greater with AI in this space.
It's remarkable that you've rolled out so many use cases, and as you said, it's major props to the technology team for doing that. I mean, I think a lot of credit unions, a lot of institutions just in general struggle with these types of rollouts, both on the technology side and then business adoption. And it feels like you have a really good framework for how you choose which use case to pursue next. So could you share a little bit about this framework, how you decide to prioritize some use cases over others?
I think the biggest opportunity that we've identified is it's not about rolling out cool technology and then finding the problem to apply it to, right? We start with the member first. What are our member pain points? What do our members want? And then we go find the solution that's going to deliver that. So when we analyze how we utilize AI, it wasn't a buzz where we said, hey, we got to use AI because everybody's using it. We had specific use cases on our roadmap of member experience improvements that we want to improve on. And with AI, we're able to now apply it to the original business case that we have in order to improve that experience. So what I would say is that Wescom, we prioritize our opportunities through our operational efficiency framework across our entire organization. And right now, we've deployed the frontline agent, which is that AI assistant that enables our representatives to find answers quickly. Because again, if you have longer hold times, you have a higher transfer rate, you have a higher new hire turnover. You basically say, oh, well, how can I use technology to get better there? And that's where we determined that AI knowledge assistant was the best solution. And then, after you vet it and you test it and you roll it out, we're able to see the results, right? Faster speed to answers, lower transfer rates, lower turnover for new hires, better, more occupancy. People are team members are more available because we're getting through these calls much quicker and answering member requests and inquiries. And then we also see it in our member satisfaction scores. They're also improving in that space as well. So we look at a number of things, but we take operational efficiency, member experience, AI technology, and we match it up to get to the right solution for our members.
And with that prioritization of where the pain is and deciding what to work on, how do you decide whether to build it in-house, what software vendors or partners to work with? How does that decision-making process happen?
We have a monthly meeting where we talk through our projects. We have a list of projects, and we, me personally, I'll speak for myself. I talk to a lot of vendors, look at a lot of white paper, a lot of research. When the phone system was one of the opportunities where we had to make a decision around, are we going to build it in house or were we going to go with a vendor? And it took time, right? Where everyone's at the table talking about the pros and the cons and the return on investment and what makes sense. And we really just have some really in-depth conversations around what makes sense from an ROI and a member experience and a timing perspective, right? We could build it in-house or we can go with the vendor, and there's pros and cons on speed, right, to market, and also for quality and the ability to make changes faster internally. We weigh all of that together through our project management committee, and best answer wins, right? And the best answer is what's best for our members. So yeah, that's how we start that process.
So in the example of basically having Copilot and assisting the frontline workers, it seems like you may have evaluated external vendors and then you decided to kind of build in-house using Copilot. Could you maybe just share a little bit about what were the big drivers that led you to that decision?
Microsoft is a great partner for us. That relationship, I would say, is a dual one, right? So we didn't create our own Dynamics type system, right? We leverage the core of that relationship and then we customize ourselves, right? So our technology team does a really great job in deciding how much they build on existing technology and how much we would give to a vendor to own for us for technology.
Let's talk a little bit about the return on investment, right? I think having impact, having good perspective as to what you should be measuring in terms of success or failure, I think is really critical. So could you maybe just walk us through one of the examples here of how did you set the metrics to measure against? And then what did you find as you started implementing and realizing some of the gains from what you had built up?
We don't build the technology and then go find the problem. We leverage our biggest member pain points from a prioritization standpoint, and then we research and do the due diligence around what is the best technology and approach to solving or reducing the friction point for our members. So that's the first step. We noticed that we were maybe transferring calls to other areas more often. We realized that our new hire turnover was a little bit higher than we wanted it to. We always had pretty decent answer rates. That's basically how long it takes us to answer the phone because time is important for our members. But we always want to get faster without compromising our quality and our accuracy. So the thought process here at the time was, well, what is the root cause? So we did some root cause analysis around what's driving the transfer rates or the turnover or the longer hold times. And it boiled down to just the lack of empowerment at the front line. And if I'm going to empower a frontline representative, I have to make sure that I'm providing them with the proper tools in order to make the decisions at the front line. And the tools that we had were not that great procedurally, right? And so we decided that we wanted to empower our team at the front line, meaning if you can handle a member request on that call, then I'm not going to ask you to go transfer it to somebody else or another area. And that saved so much time for our members. And our team members were just so excited because they want to be empowered. They want that ownership, and that's why they're here. So we basically did some other things internally. But from a technology standpoint, we utilize AI as an assistant because that actually solved, hit a lot of the nails, right? It was like, all right, you don't have to transfer, but how do I know all this information? Well, we have Copilot, and it's written in a way where you can understand it while you're talking to someone. Like literally, if you and I could demo, and we can actually work as a rep using Copilot, in a day or two, versus spending 3 months in training and nesting and having to learn different processes. So I think the moral here is, or the summary here is that we want to make it easier for our team members, right? And we also want to make sure that we're empowering them. And these AI tools that we implemented, we saw the results almost immediately. The transfer rate improvements, the quicker answer, and this is all consistent. So it's not like hey, we're doing great this month and next month we're falling off. It's literally month over month, year over year, extraordinary results, just by empowering and supporting our team members with the right technology in order to service our members.
I think this is a great case study in so many ways in terms of how do you identify where to apply this technology? How do you set good metrics to measure against, and what do outcomes look like? I suppose a little bit what's a little bit harder is, sometimes you hear in financial services kind of this top line metric that people track. Perhaps it could be number of members or overall balances. It could be, I think it's supposed to, like with the world that you occupy, it could be NPS, measuring that as a member, as a metric for member satisfaction. But it often feels hard to draw the direct line from, let's say, fewer transfers or shorter queue times to balances or direct NPS scores. So how do you think about having the right metrics that are a little bit more timely for gauging whether something is a success or not a success?
And that's a great question, because if there was a straight line, then anybody can do this job, right? So it is definitely it's like a chef. You gotta, you could write down the ingredients and say, hey, this is how you make, your favorite meal. But there's always something missing when they make it versus when I make it, right? So it's really the art part of it, right? It's not just all science, because if that was the case, then the bots would have been doing this a long time ago, right? So it's the art, is what I would say. So it's a combination, and as I mentioned before, here at Wescom, we put we have a member first mindset in everything that we do, right? And any technology that we deploy, the key here is to monitor the process once you roll it out, to test your hypothesis of what you expected. So the key here is you don't just roll it out and, hey, it's done and we're going to see great results. You roll it out in a way where you have the proper reporting so that you can monitor and gauge what changed from before and after. And then you layer on top the next thing, and then you do the same thing. So it's really about the monitoring once you deploy, and then you can sort of see the metrics move on its own, but the focus is on the technology or the process, and then the monitoring of that to ensure that it's actually doing what you expected it to do, in essence.
I think the seeing results and getting it right, even if there is some trial and error, is so encouraging, because then it also gives you momentum to do the next use case and the use case after, right? So I think the winners end up compounding their wins very quickly, whereas the ones that are laggards, maybe they've had an initial bad experiment, or maybe they were skeptical of what AI could do. They're going to find themselves really far adrift in terms of where the leaders in the space are. But I want to talk about the human side of things, because I think this is what is super important. That it's a huge thing that separates leaders versus laggards. One of the things that I'm noticing in the U.S., especially versus the rest of the world, is that when you look at surveys and when you look at the temperature in the room, I think the leaders, like the CEOs, the C-suites and such, they're very gung-ho about AI adoption because they could see the impact that it could have on the business. But when you get to the average employee, they're a little bit more skeptical. And sometimes the question they ask is, how does AI really help them out? Yes, it leads to cost reduction and it's efficiency play. They might even buy that it improves the customer member experience. But for them, sometimes it feels like you're asking them to learn something net new, which they might not be completely open to do, or they might not know how to do. and then they're worried about having to do more work versus how they used to do things a year or two ago, or they're worried about job security, etc. So I'm curious how you've gotten around some of these like very human-centric issues with the employee base that you have. How have you gotten them to adopt the AI tools and see it that as a valuable part of their employee experience?
That's a great question. I'll tell you, if I were to move someone's seat from one place to another place, they'd be skeptical about it. So it's I don't know. It was a book a long time ago called "Who Moved My Cheese," right?
Yeah.
And it's just human nature, right? When I go to a meeting, if I'm in a 2-day meeting or 2 or more days, and the first day I sit in a certain seat, when I go the second day, I'm going to expect to go back to that same seat, regardless of when I came into the meeting. It's just for some reason I'm thinking it's my seat, and then if someone sits there, I'm looking at them like, wait a minute, that's my seat, even though it's anyone's seat. So there's going to be skepticism or some just worry about doing something different than what I was doing before. So knowing that, changing the way people do their job is very, very hard at first. It is, regardless of whatever industry you're in or if it's technology or not. But AI is such a hot button topic that at first, deploying AI as an organization, we were met with resistance and skepticism, and we still are, right? But what I've learned and through experience is that the training of our staff, and what I mean by training is making it easier, right? They may not care about, or they do care, but they may not be in the top of their mind about the answer rate or the first contact resolution or transfer rate. They just want to help the member, right? And they want to do it quickly. They want to do it without having to transfer it, and they want to feel confident in the answers they're giving, right? So training is a very important part of post rollout or a pre rollout of any AI tools. So we trained our staff. We showed them, how it streamlined their tasks, right? How it made their jobs easier, and that's when they became enthusiastic. The key is how do I help you understand how this is going to make your job easier, faster, and that's when they start to sort of pay attention and sit up, right? And as I mentioned before, the user interface early on with the Copilot was frustrating, right? Because it wasn't intuitive. But once we made it easy, the team adopted it more. So I would just say that after we modified it, we saw the difference in adoption, and they felt the empowerment because they were able to then see the results, right? So once they got over the hurdle, right, of the skepticism, and they felt that they had the support and we were making it easy, right? That's when they felt the empowerment. We started to see the results. And with those results and empowerment, we now have an engaged team member.
I think it's truly really hard work, as you're saying, right? You can't just throw AI tools at people and hope they figure out how to make it work. I mean, there needs to be good training. You got to be close to how the adoption is happening. Figure out what the hurdles are, where the resistance is, and I think that's exactly what you did. And part of it was the user interface and some of the experience that employees had using the tools. And it's through trial and error you made it work, right? But I think it does take really hard effort, concerted effort to do that. But I think when done well, you get the incredible outcomes that you've already started to see, right? And I think that's a very uplifting story, because I don't think I don't think the average organization is as far along as where you are, and I think they could learn from how you've done it, and I think hopefully that is a very encouraging story. And I'm curious, Hashim, on what the future may look like, right? So I think obviously, I think if you look at Silicon Valley, and venture capital firms, and the kind of the AI hype cycle to some extent, they're kind of painting this future of an agentic company, maybe a more fully autonomous member service. But I'm curious if that's the vision you have, and if not, what is the more pragmatic vision for the future?
Yeah, I would say the short answer is that it is, right? I think that is the future is a fully autonomous member interaction, right? You got the agentic AI that uh, you know solves a member's problem, requests super fast, protects their information, and completes the requests, without anyone else having to be involved, right? There are multiple steps in the middle of that, right? You're going to have sort of that human in the middle, right, to make sure that it's accurate, right? But I do share that fully autonomous vision. I think about and we're in Los Angeles, and we have Waymos that are driving
Yeah.
without drivers, right? But that's not the norm right now, right? For me, it's like we're like the Tesla right now, where you can auto drive, but I gotta be sitting in the driver's seat with my hand on the wheel, just because again I'm still the pilot, you're the co-pilot. But I do think that the Waymo example is the future. I think where I'm fuzzy on is how long is it going to take us to get there, and as a financial institution, we have to get there safely, and we can't have inconsistencies or inaccuracies because our members expect us to be accurate, and they trust us. So we need to make sure that we're protecting them. So I do see that in the future, and I think that Silicon Valley is spot on. But sometimes when you're so far in the future, you can hallucinate a little bit, like AI, right? So you got to have that practicality umbrella over it to get there safely.
Yeah, and I love the levels of autonomy example with autonomous driving, right? Because it's stages and phases of how we get there, and it may take longer than we expect. But I think the North Star is the one that you painted, and it's just a question of how do we do it, especially because the impact of failure is, and it might not be as catastrophic as autonomous driving, but it's pretty close in the sense that you're touching people's financial lives. You cannot screw a transaction up. You can't have hugely biased results there, or biased for any reason. And so the impact of failure is quite high, and so the accuracy has to be incredibly high. And therefore, because the stakes are so incredibly high, it's going to take us time to fully make that autonomous, right? Truly autonomous. And so these phases that you're going through presently and others are going through, they're really important stepping stones for that bigger future. Well, Hashim, really appreciate you joining us today. Really appreciate your thoughts, and I'm excited to track you closely over the next year or two. And I would love to have a follow up conversation in the future and see where you end up being in the levels of autonomy in a couple of years from now.
Absolutely, look forward to it. Thank you.